Welcome everybody to the St. Mary's County Library on Charge Electric Vehicles in Southern Maryland. There is a lot changing in this field and we want to open up the conversation. So tonight we are going to be talking to a representative from SMECO. I'll be introducing everybody in just a minute. And then we also have two area dealerships that will be talking about what cars are available right now and in the near future. So before we get started, I do want to point out to everyone that you can turn on your chat by clicking on that on the bottom of your screen, and it will open up a panel on the right-hand side. If you look at the very bottom of that panel, it asks you who your message is going to. If you'd like all of your fellow participants to see it as well, please change that to everyone. And then the very bottom of the screen, you can type there. If you have comments to add or websites or things like that, those belong in chat. If you have questions for our panelists, please use the question and answer feature, and that's kind of to the left of the middle on the bottom of your screen. And that allows you to type in questions, and if we keep them separate, it'll make it easier for us to process everybody's questions and make sure we get all of that answered. I will also be sending a follow-up email after this program once we have the recording switched over to closed captions and it's public. I'll be sending you that along with follow-up resources. So let us get started. I am going to show, we are going to start with Michael Hyland, who is from Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, SMECO. He is Program Manager for Energy and Technology. We also have Donald Sachs from Waldorf Ford, Sales Associate, and we have Mark Wanamaker from the Bayside Auto Group that has locations across the Tri-County area and Annapolis and Virginia as well. So we are going to start by talking about electric vehicles in general and how to keep them charged, and then we're going to follow with our talking about how to get them. Okay. Michael Hyland.
Ready for me to jump in, Christine?
Yes, jump in. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thanks to St. Mary's and Calvert County Libraries for hosting this. We're pretty excited at SMECO about the future of electric vehicles in Southern Maryland and throughout the whole state, let alone the whole country. But a little more intimate to us. We've got some challenges, and I'll just try to present you with some statistics, maybe some of the challenges we're working our way through. So if you want to go to the next slide. So quick agenda, just so you know what I'm covering. I'd like to cover the status of EVs and EV charging in Maryland, and then more specifically in Southern Maryland. I'll go over some EV charger basics, just so everyone's on the same page. I think we hear all the time about a charger. Well, chargers are not alike all the time. You need to know the difference between the levels. Go over some statistics, what Maryland's facing and Southern Maryland's facing, and then some of the challenges. There's a lot of challenges. We'll just cover a few. And then one quick slide on the program that SMECO is calling the EV Recharge Program. And then we can do Q&A, I guess, at the end. So next slide, please. I was always told you should really jump out with a gee whiz slide all the time. And this is a gee whiz slide. It's kind of showing you what is the status of electric vehicle growth in the state of Maryland. And when I'm saying electric vehicles here, I mean hybrids and all electric. But I've been tracking, I came on board to SMECO about a year ago, so August of 20 during COVID. And there's the graph that shows in the time that I've been here, we've moved from just over 25,000 cars on the road in Maryland to almost 35,000 as of July. So we're growing. We're not growing maybe as fast as we thought. This is all based on Maryland Department of Transportation data. Next slide, please. So although we're sitting at that 34,841 number, the state of Maryland set a goal that we would have 300,000 electric and hybrid vehicles on the road by the end of 2025. So you can see the nice flat curve that I had showing the last year. Look at the growth we have to meet if we're going to meet our 2025 Maryland goals. I'm not sure we can meet that goal, so it'll be pushed out. but you can see the challenge ahead of us. We're sitting at a little over 10 to 15% of the cars required to meet that goal on the road right now. And the growth would have to be pretty astronomical. That's a straight line. I didn't put any exponential function into it, but you can see every year, every month, we are starting to kick up, but the challenges are ahead of us. Next slide, please. So what's the current status in Southern Maryland? What I'm really more specifically concerned about is the SMECO territory. SMECO serves all of St. Mary's County, all of Charles County. We serve about 90 to 95% of Calvert County and about 10% of Prince George's County, the southern portion of Prince George's. So if you take the vehicles in the state and we look at the zip codes, and then we do some fluffing of, okay, we only serve 25% of this code, 50% of this zip code, we come up with an approximate of about 1,693 hybrid and electric vehicles on the road in Southern Maryland territory. This is more art than science. There's a few databases out there, but this comes out to about 920 all electric and 773 plug-in. Overall, hybrids have been leading the way. We think in the future, it's going to move more towards electric. You also see there was an uptick in the last few months of electric vehicle sales, and I think you'll hear that later in the presentation. But 1,693 is an approximate. So we need to have chargers for all of those vehicles that are out there. Next slide, please. I think one of the things the average person asks us all the time is, well, are there enough chargers for me to own an electric vehicle? I work in DC, I work in Reston, I work in Baltimore. Do I have the ability to charge if my battery's low? And the answer to that is pretty much yes. You'll see on the left, PlugShare is a crowdsourced software. You can just download the app right now while you're listening to the presentation. And folks put in different chargers that they see or charge at throughout the United States. It's actually not just limited to the United States. You can look at Germany, you can look at Puerto Rico, you can look at any territory, and anything for a charger is out there. It can be privately owned, it could be at a brewery, it could be at an auto dealership, it could be at SMECO's headquarters. But you'll see that on the left is the United States side. So a lot of chargers. But if you start to zero in on Southern Maryland, on the territory that we serve, you'll see that there's some areas that seem to be populated pretty much as expected, coming down 301, coming down Remy Route 5 when you get towards Lexington Park. But there's a lot of, sparseness in there. We'll see some territories where there are no chargers. So what happens if you live in Nanjemoy, right? Or, you live in certain parts of, St. Leonard in Calvert County, you can see there's no real chargers sitting there. So we have a program through the State Public Service Commission called the EV Recharge Program. And one of our jobs is to kind of kickstart this idea of having more and more public chargers. And we're going to put in 60 of them. And we're working with the different counties, the 4 counties, to put them on government-owned public sites. So next slide, please. Probably the most basic question we get. What's this difference between a level 1, a level 2, a level 3? Why is a level 3 called DC fast charger? So here's a quick slide. There's different ways of explaining this. Donald did a great job in explaining to me how he does it. But from where I stand, a level 1 charger is simply plugging it into your 120 volt outlet. It's a typical household outlet. Think about putting your charge in your driveway and pulling an extension cord out and plugging it into the car. And it's a slow charge. It takes a long time. And if your battery's pretty low, it's going to take you not just overnight, but 12 hours or more to fully charge that battery. As you move to level 2, we double the voltage. It's a 240 volt outlet. So think of your household clothes dryer, or if you have an electric stove and range, and that really pretty much doubles it. The most common one is a 30 or 40 amp circuit. And most residential owners who buy an electric vehicle, so if you look at that 1,600 plus vehicles, the majority of them probably have a level 2 charger at their house. They installed it in their garage, or they installed it off of their house in the driveway. And that's where they do most of their charging, unless they may have a charger at work. And this is called medium speed charging. This is going to take you 4 to 8 hours to fully charge. And as Donald was explaining to me earlier, there's different ways of looking at charging. I was putting it more in hours. You can break it down into miles. You could say, how much is it to do 100 miles? For a level 1, it's going to take you a long time. Level 2, 100 miles will take you 3 to 4 hours. And then we get to level 3. And the level 3 for us at SMECO is much more robust and bulk. It's a three-phase service. It's 277, 480. They're typically known as DC fast chargers. We're converting from AC to DC at a high rate, and then we're doing fast charging. And the level of strength on level threes, we're putting in 50 kW units. So are the other utilities throughout the state. We have requested to triple that and go to 150 kW charger. Every time you increase the strength of the electric service that does the charging, you're going to increase the speed that the battery can actually charge. So we're looking at probably in the next 5 to 10 years, 300 kW DC fast chargers that will be able to charge a car in pretty much 5 to 10 minutes, like a gas station would if you were buying petrol. Next slide, please. So just some quick growth statistics for the state of Maryland. Our service territory is about 6%. Bear with me there. It could be a little over 6, a little under 6, depending on how you cut it up. But if we look at customers served, electric load. So if Maryland's goal is 300,000 EVs, regardless of whether they hit 2025 or not, but if it's 300,000, they're going to need 9,200 public-facing chargers. Now, that doesn't mean residential chargers. That doesn't mean workplace chargers. These are chargers that the public can stop at whether it's a car dealership or it's a park or it's a community center. So if you do the math on that, and we're 6% of 300,000 is 18,000 vehicles in Southern Maryland. Remember, right now we're at 1,693 as of July. So we have an incredible growth. Over 16,000 more vehicles are going to be on the road in the next 5 to 7 years. And we're going to need 550 public chargers. So if you go back to that slide, don't go back to it, Christine, but if you think back to that slide that I showed of PlugShare, there certainly weren't 550 public chargers in Southern Maryland. They're probably on the order of 40 to 50. So we have a 10-time growth to meet these goals if we're actually going to have 18,000 electric vehicles on the road. And if you look at charging, it's also important to point out, where do people charge? I think people get confused thinking these public chargers are going to be the end all. Well, the reality is 80% or more of all charging occurs at the house. And why is that? Well, if you're on your way home, let's say you're working in Annapolis, DC, wherever, and you're coming home for supper, or you have a class that night at the school, or you're going to the library, are you really going to stop to charge your vehicle when you have a long range on the vehicle and you can charge for cheaper at home? So we're seeing about 80% of all charging is at home. And then there's about 10% split between work and another 10% split at these charging stations. So this is something we're going to monitor and see, is how much these chargers are actually used as we install them throughout the Southern Maryland territory. If you go to the next slide, please. All right, some challenges. Well, I could sit here and list 17 slides worth of challenges, but I figured I'd pick off some of the big ones. Right now is cost. Cost of the vehicles is a big thing for folks, right? Good thing about cost of vehicle, it's coming down. The more we make, the cheaper they become. But you also have the cost of the equipment, not just the public equipment, but if you want to charge your home after you buy an electric vehicle, if you have an older residence with a 100 amp circuit breaker, you may need to upgrade to a 200. Well, who's paying for that? You got to pay for the electrician, you got to have the circuit run. So there's costs all around this transition from what are called ICE vehicles, or combustion vehicles, versus electric vehicles. Education's a big one. This is why this is so exciting to have this event that Christine's pulled together. Is we need to do a better job of educating the folks on what type of vehicles are out there. Everything from the pickup trucks coming in to sedans. What about when resale happens? There's a whole group of vehicles that become used over 3 to 5 years off of leases, and there's a whole group that purchase them. That's about to start hitting us in the next few years as these used vehicles start to be purchased, may not have the exact battery size. They need to be educated on that. We want to do ride and drive events. We're looking to do one the October 10th over in Running Hare Vineyard in Calvert County, but we're planning on doing other ones. I've already talked to Donald about one, maybe next year, and hopefully, I can hook up with Mark the same way, our 2 speakers coming after me. Big problem is parking concerns. One of the issues we hear all the time is, what happens if internal combustion engine vehicle parks in my charging station outside of my business? What right do I have to have them towed? Right now, you don't. We don't have any state laws. It's come up for 12 straight years, but we do not have a law as of today. We do not even have an agreement on what the space should be colored, what the sign should say. We're kind of going through that learning phase. We definitely don't have a national program. We're federal laws, but the state of Maryland is struggling with this. I think Annapolis may be the only territory that actually went ahead and came together on what they're saying the color of the signs have to be. They've got rules on how long you can be in the parking space. But this can be a big frustration for electric vehicles when they get there and somebody's parking there outside of, say, a library or outside of a community center, and they're not even an electric vehicle charging, let alone if someone is an electric vehicle and has just been there too long. Multi-unit dwelling charging. This is the biggest problem I think that we're facing, not just in Maryland, but we're seeing this across the United States. You go and you buy a vehicle and you live in a condo on the third floor on the other side of the building. How do you charge your vehicle? You can't really run an extension cord, a level 1 charging, over the roof to where your parking spot is. And does your multi-unit dwelling, your apartment complex, your HOA, have a level 2 charger there? And what happens if someone gets there first? So we're trying to figure it out, and all the utilities, we've been having conference calls on this, but there's all kinds of studies going across the United States. Department of Energy is involved on figuring out what is the best way to handle apartment complexes, HOAs, when it comes to multi-unit dwelling charging. Fleet charging is going to be a struggle for utilities to handle. What happens if Amazon and United States Postal Service, school buses, all of a sudden all start ordering electric vehicles? Do we have the infrastructure on our distribution system? Do we have the generation lined up to handle that type of charging? What happens if that charging all happens at 4:30, 5 o'clock at night on a hot day like tonight, when we already have every air conditioner on, people are turning the lights on, people are starting to cook? The last thing we need maybe is fleets to all start charging at the same time. So we need to start looking at time of use rates, off-peak charging, incentives to charge on times like middle of the night where it's cheaper, our system's not as stretched, we're not dealing with such a robust request from us. And then that really gets into that electric infrastructure. Utilities across not just Maryland, but the United States are eyeing this carefully because it's coming. We're seeing the vehicles and we need to make sure we're ready. And that's part of our job over the next probably 5 to 10 years. Next slide, please.
I actually have a question that I'd like to interject here. The price for charging on the road is quite high compared to charging at home. Do you expect that to equalize at all? At home, it's 14 cents per kilowatt. If the price is too high, then no one will use the public chargers.
I do not see it levelizing. I think, SMECO, we're a nonprofit co-op. So we're charging everybody right now the same at residential charging, whether they have a car or not, right? You're getting the same cost for electrons, for your air conditioning unit, your dishwasher, as you do for your electric vehicle. The chargers that are public that are out there, our level 2 is 18 cents a kilowatt hour, which is quite high. And our level 3 is 34 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, ours are the exact same as the other utilities in the state. For the state, BG&E, PEPCO, the PHI utilities, we all have a 34-18 as our split. So all of our public facing charges are the same. But I do think that's going to be the problem going forward. Why would I stop there if I can go home and get it for much less, whether it's 14 cents or even lower, depending on if we go to a time of use rate? It's probably the biggest detriment to public facing charging. The cost to charge at a public facing charger, if I was actually going to charge you and try to make that charger pay for itself, say in a 10-year period, it would be much higher than at 18 cents or 34 cents. And that's just undigestible, right? No one's going to charge if it's $1 a kilowatt hour. So this has actually asked the utilities to get together and possibly develop a new charging rate for commercial chargers out there. And we're going to work with, hopefully, anybody who has an electric charger, such as Tesla and the EVgo, SEMA Connect, and even ourselves to come up with a rate. Long-winded answer, I'm sorry, but I just don't see it changing quickly.
Yeah, it is a really different mindset because essentially we have a gas station at home because you can charge an electric car at your house, whereas you can't fill up your gasoline car at your house. So it's a very different situation for us now.
Exactly. And I think you're also going to see some very unique ways of charging being offered, right? We know there's chargers coming in right now that have a revolving advertisement on them, and they're giving you free charging, and they're making their money from the advertisements. They're going around to the local businesses saying, I'll give you a 20-second spot on this screen every 5 minutes for a year for, say, $1,000. And they're getting 20, 30, 40 businesses lined up. And then the charging's free because they're really selling the advertisement, right? Mm-hmm. You have some car manufacturers that offer so many times of charging for free because why? They want to sell a car. It's not about the charging, right? So we'll probably see more of these different models come up where I could see a restaurant or a brewery or something putting one in saying free charging as a way of attracting business. Mm-hmm. And that's another model, right? So we're going to see a lot of this change going forward, and it'll be unique to see who wins or who has the best model depending on what they're selling.
Oh, right. See how the competition plays out, I guess.
Yep, exactly. And last slide, just real quick on our EV recharge program. We're pretty proud of it. We really started in January to install. We've had 9 units installed so far in the first 7.5 months. We have 4 down in St. Mary's County. We have 5 in Charles County. We've just signed agreements for 4 in Calvert County. Pretty excited there. And we're working with PG to put chargers there. So that's pretty exciting. We're thinking it's going to be about 50 level 2s and 10 level 3 chargers by the time we get done. Our goal is to put in about 1 to 1.5 chargers per month. That's where we're at. And remember, it has to be on government public property. So I can't put it in a shopping mall, but I can put it at the Leonardtown Library. I can't put it at something that has a gate that won't allow people to come in on weekends. It has to be accessible 24/7. We're looking at developing a strategy for home charging. Right now, we're looking at a rebate program for anyone who does put in a level 2 charger at the house. We're looking at time of use rates. That would be really to help us too, to offload some of the charging to later in the night. We're also looking at that really difficult one I mentioned, the multi-unit dwellings. And then educational outreach. I mentioned the event in Calvert County at Running Hare in October, but more things like this. I think we really need to get out there and let people know that the range anxiety can start to go away. As one, we have more chargers available, but 2, the range of a car has come up. When I drove the Ford EcoStar back in the 90s, we're talking under 100 miles was the range. SMECO has an EV Bolt that we have. Okay, we've got the Chevy. It's 285 miles is the range. So you could drive up to Baltimore and back, and you still have 70 miles in that tank. So that starts to go away and you feel more comfortable driving a longer distance. If you have more work and home charging, you may not even be using these chargers much at all unless it's convenient, such as going to a library or you're going to swim practice at a community center. So with that, that's my last slide. Christine, thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael. And I'll be including his email in the information that I sent all the registrants afterwards. I wanted to include some information. We're all about information at the library, and this is from the Department of Energy website. One of the main selling points for electric vehicles is that there's no emissions for the battery-powered electric vehicles. There are no emissions out of your tailpipe. But the question does come up, what are the emissions, the effective emissions, the CO2 that's generated when you make the electricity that powers the electric vehicle? So the Department of Energy has this website, and you can check by state. So this is specific to Maryland, and the pie chart is showing you where we're generating our energy for our electricity. And they calculate the emissions that are produced through that energy production. And the bar chart on the right is showing you a comparison between different types of vehicles for the equivalent emissions. So the high bar is a gasoline powered car, and that's what's coming out of the tailpipe. And on the far left bar is an all electric vehicle. And this compensates for CO2 produced for the electricity for it. And it's a 76% savings on the emissions that you're putting up into the air. So for an average car, we're saving 4.4 tons of CO2 up in the air. So now we are going to move on to, we talked about what it sort of is looking like in general, how to get it charged. Now let's talk about what's out there, what's available. And we have our two car dealers, Donald Sachs from Waldorf Ford and Mark Wanamaker from the Bayside Auto Group that covers the Tri-County and beyond. So let me share this. Okay, and Mark, please talk, and Donald, feel free to interject when you would like to.
Okay.
So hello, everybody. I've got to kind of just say first and foremost, thank you to Christine and St. Mary's Library for setting this up. I think it's great. I need to kind of say that I am not somebody that sells cars every day. So if you're looking for me to answer specific questions, I apologize. My brother and I are a business in the retail car business. I will say the reason I'm on this is because I am a big EV hybrid fan, and there is a great picture that I did not share, but my brother is driving a large SUV and I'm driving a Prius plug-in, and he thinks it was hilarious, and he takes a picture of our two cars and, you know, kind of what we like and what we enjoy. So I want to start off by saying that, but I'm excited about the conversation. There's a lot of interesting conversation in the media and where everything's going. And there's been a lot of evolution and change. I think first and foremost, I would say that all the manufacturers are shifting their energy and their dollars for investing into electric, and maybe still some hybrid, but there's definitely more energy going into electric. And there's been a shift from hybrid, probably a little bit, as Michael said, because of the infrastructure. People needed the ability to count on having a way in case the battery went low. And so we have seen that shift because, I think, of the infrastructure. And, you know, in my particular case, I was driving a plug-in hybrid, and I was able to get almost 1,000, maybe 1,100 miles by using the plug-in part and getting 40 miles of electric before it kicked into gas. So I'm a huge believer, and I hope that what we have to share will be helpful, and happy to answer any questions in general, I should say. So I guess we'll go to the next slide, if that's. So one of the questions Christine asked is, what are the things that we hear from customers that come in and are interested in buying electric, and in some cases hybrid? And these are kind of the common answers that we hear from our customers, and, you know, what their motivation is. So I think this is kind of answers. Christine, would you like me to go through them, or is it just more sharing that and allowing people to read it and have any questions?
No, why don't you just hit on your main points here?
So I think number one is minimize the carbon footprint, and, you know, what can they do to make a difference? And so I think that is probably the first and foremost. And I think a question that was brought up by one of the people in the audience, is there a lower cost overall by having electric versus gas? And that's something also that we hear quite frequently. I think one that comes up quite a bit is EVs are going to require no oil and fewer brake replacements. You know, overall, EVs have less moving parts than a mechanical engine. So we do see that we think there's going to be less cost. There hasn't been enough consistently, as Michael talked about. We do have the Bolt in service. That's a pure electric. And we have not seen a huge, you know, mechanical problem. You know, there are still computers that are going to go bad. There are things that are regular maintenance that's going to be none. But overall, we are projecting that there'll be less mechanical repairs. But there isn't enough data for us to really speak specifically. It's more kind of what we feel because there's less moving parts. I think the next one is kind of, I don't know if high performance models is the right term for that. Donna will speak obviously a lot more to the Mach-E and the Ford F-150. I think the truck segment is really an interesting area that there is a lot of interest in a full electric truck. Ford has announced the Lightning. Chevrolet has announced that they have something. One thing that I would just kind of say is that we as franchise dealers are not getting information ahead of time of the public. Typically, the manufacturers are putting the information out in social media, out with media and talking about it. And we have not seen specific details for the most part, my experience in that. And I think, you know, there's a lot of shift. I think Chevrolet announced, or General Motors announced, that they were going to have 25 electric vehicles within 3 years. And I know Ford has shifted quite a bit. Toyota has told us that in 2 years, there's going to be 8 new electric models. But they haven't been real specific yet, and we're still waiting on more information. But you have this constant information saying it's coming, there's a lot more happening. And then I think people are interested in the tax credit, and we are seeing that that is some motivation, or it helps reduce the cost. One thing I would just kind of say before we go to the next slide is that the difference between a hybrid and a gas cost has come down quite a bit. And in some cases, like on the Toyota models, the difference is less to about $1,000. So that difference between gas and hybrid has come down quite a bit. And I think that's a possibility that'll keep happening. With more volume, the costs will come down more, is my take. Let's see what the next slide says. So this was kind of the question that Christine asked us, what's out there currently? And I'm going to just try to speak to some of the ones that Donald's got the Ford, and I'm going to stick with kind of the Chevrolet and the others. We've got the Bolt, and we've put the mileage that they go on a full charge. And I think Michael spoke very well about that and what's there. I think the threshold that most car batteries in that 300 range, and I think that's the high end, and then you can see the low end is in the 200. I did go ahead and sneak in one that is not readily available here, but I think it's still an interesting option that could be a possibility, which is the Mariah, which runs on hydrogen. And the only reason I just threw that out there is that I think hydrogen could still be a play. I don't, that it is an infrastructure. In California, it's pretty widespread. And I think Toyota has something like 16,000 cars that are Mariahs out there. So I think that's an interesting one. The BZ4X is one that they've announced for next year, and that is a full electric. That's a brand new model. I don't have a lot of information. I have seen some pictures, and that's really all I've seen so far about it.
Now, Mark, I believe I heard that Chevrolet, once they convert their line, they're only going to offer it as an electric option. Is that correct? Have you heard that?
I've heard that. What we don't know is what the time frame is from, gas pretty much is majority. The Bolt is a small percentage of the total cars that we sell to what would be fully electric. And I think, I wouldn't even want to guess how long it would take to convert all the way to full electric. But I think it still has to be, it's a question about infrastructure and how the demand is. Right now, we've seen a huge demand or interest for this change, and I think there's a lot of excitement around it. And I still think, when we look at Nero, which has been out for a little while, it's still a small percentage. And you look at that starting price, that's stopped it. The Leaf's been out for 2 or 3 years, and it's still a small percentage of the total volume. So I think overall, what's kept the volume down has been the infrastructure. I have 2 neighbors, and they have Teslas, or they did have Teslas, and they shifted back to hybrids. One had 3 Teslas and shifted back to a hybrid, more just because of where the infrastructure was and how he found the experience. But I think this is why it's so exciting right now. And as Michael was talking about, when this infrastructure really starts to ramp up, and a lot of the charging is at home, but I think it's just that if you do want to drive to Florida, if you do want to go somewhere long, can you do it? And I think one of the things that I found really interesting is that the battery technology could really change soon. They've announced a solid state battery. Toyota said that it'll be out in about 3 years. We're supposed to see a demo model at the end of this year. But the solid state battery is really, what the cool thing is that you can charge it in 15 minutes and you're going to get, what they're saying is up to 500 miles. And I think that's a game changer. That really makes it similar to what you're getting with going to a gas station and filling up. And I think that time frame is going to be great. And I think there is information about that you can read in Google. But what you read in Google is the same thing that I know, because I Google this every day and just look for information. So.
I'm glad you mentioned Tesla, because some people watching may wonder why I don't have a Tesla dealer tonight, because Tesla is one of the main things could be the first thing you think of when you think of electric cars. And this is only because Tesla has a different business model. They do not have dealerships. It's all done online, and they have mobile service. So there is not physically a local Tesla dealership for me to invite a person from. So that's the only reason that Tesla's not included tonight. So I just wanted to explain why that was.
And I think Tesla's done a great job. I mean, Tesla has really been the motivator to get the rest of the manufacturers, has been the competitive edge that's moved them, and now they're starting to move, but they've done a super job.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, our next slide, these are showing what the different cars look like that we just mentioned. So I'm going to move. I would like to talk a little, Mark, you had mentioned about trucks. So Donald, if you could tell us what is kind of unique about the Ford F-150 Lightning, please.
Oh, I'd love to. So F-150, best-selling vehicle in America for over 40 years. And now, of course, they've moved into the hybrid market with the 2021 F-150. And now they're moving towards the all-electric market with the F-150 Lightning. And they're still able to keep it, comparable to normal F-150 pricing structures. They have a starting price that they're estimating for the Pro at about $42,000. Starting price on an F-150 configured the same is fairly close to the pricing for the Lightning. All sorts of capability that comes with the vehicle. The hybrid has a 7.2 kilowatt Pro Power onboard feature available on it, where you can power almost an entire construction site off the truck. And with the all-electric Lightning, they have a 9.6 kilowatt Pro Power on board that's going to be available for it, and that'll be even more power available for whatever you may need to use it for.
Right. In this picture, it's showing that if you lose power in your house, like there's a storm going on outside.
Yeah, so they had they had the power loss in Texas when that winter storm hit through, and Ford and Ford dealerships were sending F-150 hybrids down there so that people could power their house off the truck.
That's really taking advantage of, you know, what's unique about the technology. So I think that's really innovative and making the most of, you know, what you have there. So could you, Ford also sells the Mustang Mach-E. Can you tell us what the comparison is between that and the standard Mustang?
Yeah, so it's a little bit different than the standard Mustang. So the standard Mustang, you have the two-door sports car, big grumbly V8 available for it, all sorts of power. But Ford's kind of taken a little piece of what anyone could want out of any vehicle. They have, you know, with the Mustang Mach-E, they have a lot of the features that are standard in it are features that may not necessarily be standard in a normal gasoline car. For the base model, a lot of safety features on it are standard, pre-collision braking, lane keeping assistance, blind spot monitoring, and it still does have the performance aspect that people expect out of the Mustang. As a matter of fact, the GT Performance trim they have coming out has a quicker 0 to 60 time than the actual two-door Mustang, and that's pretty impressive for a vehicle that's a couple thousand pounds heavier than the two-door Mustang.
That's cool.
Are the electric cars typically more heavier than the?
They are, simply because the battery, but they do have a nice low center of gravity. It's usually built down into the frame, so it doesn't sit anywhere. You're not going to have some bulky battery sitting around. You'll have plenty of space, but it's nice and low center of gravity, so you have better traction and handling in a lot of cases as well.
So do the electric vehicles have more inside storage typically? Because they have no engine, correct? So
yeah. So as a matter of fact, if you look at the picture on the bottom with the red F-150 Lightning there, that has best in class capacity for storage because it has that huge frunk available for storage of whatever items you need to put in there. I'm sure there's a weight limit on how much you can put inside of there, but yeah, it's got best in class storage capacity.
Oh, that's great. And do you sacrifice anything with the electric version as far as like pickup or torque or anything like that?
No, it's actually going to be the fastest production F-150 ever made. So you get the advantage of the performance with the electric motors that you wouldn't get out of the gas motors.
Oh, terrific. Okay. All right. Oh, this is talking about charging. Michael had mentioned, Donald, that your description to him before we started the webinar was really good about explaining how the charging works. Would you mind explaining that now?
Yeah, of course. So the way that Ford breaks it down to the dealerships in terms of charging levels is a little bit different than they don't measure it in time. They measure it in how many miles per hour you can get in a charge. So out of the 3 different levels of electrical vehicle charging, level 1, they liken it to filling a bucket with water. The level 1 stage would be like filling a bucket with a straw. So it'd be about anywhere between 3 to 5 miles per hour of charge. That's what Ford estimates. And it's also based on how charged the vehicle is and what type of vehicle you're charging as well. The level 2, so that'll be your home 240 volt plug or a public charger, level 2, would be anywhere between 22 miles to 32 miles per hour charge. Of course, again, depending on the vehicle's charge level and what type of vehicle it is. And then level 3 is the 240 volt, 48 amp fast charging station, up to 47 miles per charge in as little as 10 minutes with Ford's testing on the Mustang Mach-E.
And that was more like you're filling it with the garden hose?
Yep, so the level 2 is like filling a bucket with a garden hose. And level 3 would be like filling a bucket of water with a fire engine hose.
Well, that's a little bit different.
Yeah, that's how they explained it to us.
Okay. And there is a bullet here about the battery warranty. Because obviously the battery life is a big concern that people would have. So I see all of the dealers do have a warranty on this.
Yeah, I think that's the slide we presented just for the manufacturers that I could get that information. I think that's a big thing that people have thought about is, about the battery and the cost of it. And I would say that that's a big part of the decision in buying an electric. There was a chat from David talking about the Volkswagen. We haven't talked about the ID4, and I don't know a lot about it. I think Volkswagen's doing a great job with electric, and it's just not something I have firsthand knowledge about. I've read about it, but I think we'd be remiss in not including it. And the only reason what we saw in this slides from me is just more what we have at our stores. But I certainly think Tesla, Volkswagen, there's a lot of people doing a really nice job with it. And so I want to make sure we don't say that these are the only electric cars that are out there for sure. And then there was an anonymous attendee who has a question about the maintenance, and we do have a slide about that that's coming up.
Let's move on to that.
So it really is a great question. And I think with how hard it is to get employees, and I'll probably say something. I think that getting people trained as mechanical technicians is a big challenge for retail car dealerships. And I think it is really a good way to make a good living. And so we are working with the local school systems and their tech programs to try to help get more people in that direction. And I think it's a challenge, but it is. It's working. And so we do have a lot of people that work for us that are trained, but typically it is our people that have been with us the longest. There's a lot of training that needs to happen, that is specific by the manufacturer and required by the manufacturer before you can service their cars. And I think the question is probably, can we service brands that we don't sell or don't have technicians that are certified by the manufacturer? I would probably say we probably can't. I would be very careful about that, because I do think that that specific training to that car is really important. And the certification that's required to be able to do the work on it, and then you have to be recertified yearly in taking classes, is really important. And I think, our guys spend a lot of time and a lot of hours doing it. So I hope that is helpful, but I know it's not really answering the question that the person asked. And I'm not sure specific what car manufacturer they were asking about as far as training, but or servicing their car. I'm just rereading their question again.
Yes.
But yes, we can do it for Chevrolet and Toyota, and Donald can do it for Ford. So I hope that helps you in some ways. But I do think it's really important that somebody that's certified, that is getting recertified yearly, is working on your car, because of the different parts and how complicated it is.
Donald, I think you told me that to keep your warranty valid, you need to go to unauthorized, like that you need to go back to the dealership.
I always recommend going to the dealership for service. It's the only way to make sure that everything's being done properly and is covered under warranty, especially on these highly sophisticated electric vehicles. Ford puts out rigorous programs for the dealerships to be certified to sell and work on electric vehicles. So I always recommend taking advantage of that. Make sure that the pros do the work that they're paid to do.
There's a couple more questions out there. Donald, there's one specific to you. There's another question from Cynthia. Is there a trade-in value paid for dead batteries? Yes, I think there is. It's just like damage to a car or something else wrong with a car. It would just have to be evaluated on a one-to-one case, but there's definitely value to the car overall, even if the batteries are dead. And then there was the anonymous, it was about a Bolt, and the dealership, the question was specific to a dealership that they asked, and I'm not probably talking about specific dealerships, but I would say that I think the reason for that is that General Motors wants to make sure that if a dealership is servicing a car, that they've got the trained people and that they have the right tools to be able to do the work. And so prior, the last couple of years, quite honestly, dealerships made a decision, is it worth paying the cost of doing that for the number of cars that were being sold? And at some point it wasn't really, there was about 3 cars being sold that were electric for the whole Maryland area in 1 month. And people were doing the calculation and saying it wasn't. I think that's changed a lot recently. And maybe the dealership you're speaking to has a different policy than they did when you talk to them. And I'm not sure if that was recent or not, but I think most of us that are in the dealership business have got our people trained, have bought the charging stations and the tools to be able to service electric vehicles. And I would think that's changing for everybody.
Yeah, I actually believe that particular dealership is relocated to a new spot, and part of the reason was to increase their facilities so that they might be able to service that now. So I think that's exactly what you're talking about, Mark, that they're changing to keep up with the times.
So to go back to Debbie's question in the chat, she asked why I didn't talk about the 2022 Ford Ranger. I don't have any information on if Ford is planning to do a hybrid or all electric Ranger, so I don't think it would fit into this specific conversation. Right now, all that Ford has released is the Lightning, the Mach-E, and an electric transit van. And then going down, let's see, Ford Pass for service. I'm not sure the specific situation on Debbie's issue with service, but I'm not sure which Ford dealership. Had to look up information on YouTube to figure it out for her situation.
Yeah, I guess we can't answer specific issues. It's a growing process, and of course there's some frustration along the way as all these little kinks are getting worked out. Is the training expensive for the technicians?
It's not really expensive. For the most part, prior to COVID, we would send people to regional areas to get training. Since COVID, a lot of it is done through webcast, and it's really just them taking the time of losing revenue that they would generate. Most technicians are paid by the job, and so part of them, they have to invest in themselves and do the training. So, we pay for them when they have to go out of town, stay in hotels, their food, their airfare, but most of that's changed in the last year and a half. So most of the training is done through webinars, and then it's just them losing the revenue. And so then we end up paying them that difference so that they're, doing it. And so it's kind of like we do the same thing with their vacation time so that they don't lose any money to get it.
I want to go back to Debbie. It looks like she had another question about the Ranger. I think she may be mistaken with the Ford Maverick. That's going to be a hybrid electric pickup that Ford is releasing in 2022.
Okay. And as Mark was saying, it sounds like the dealers put their information out to Google maybe before they tell the dealership. So you don't learn about it much ahead of when we learn about it.
Is there
Okay.
another slide?
Oh, yes.
And I think this just pertains a little bit more to what the guys have to get certified to do to be able to do the work correctly. And this is more specific to specifics. I do think that the note on the bottom says that EV batteries, they have 480 volts and high amperage. I do think people that aren't trained in it should be very careful because I think it is very dangerous.
Mm-mm.
And I think the last note is we do see issues when people aftermarkets are being added that have caused problems, and we've had to fix them. And so it's something just to be careful of. It doesn't mean it can't be done. It just has to be done by somebody who has some good experience, I think.
Right. So the field, the auto service industry is going to change right along with the sales industry and the infrastructure that the SMECO is putting out. We're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah, we definitely are. We're all catching up. It's been a big push. There's been a lot of shift in people getting training and being ready for the demand that I think we all see that's coming. And I think it's great. I'm excited about it. I really am. I think it's really good. I think the technology, the ability to have a car that can, it's faster, it's quieter. There's a lot of great features. It's a lot of fun to drive an electric car, I think. So.
Oh, okay. Someone says, thank you very much. I've been hungry for the info and this helps. Yeah, it's new technology and it has more questions than answers. So it's nice to just get the conversation started. So as I said before, I'll be sending an email out to everyone who registered. And that will probably show up at the beginning of next week because I just have to wait for the recording to go public. And I'll have contact information if you have any follow-up questions for any of our panelists. And I think we have covered all of our questions. Just want to make sure we got them all. Okay, well, I really appreciate the time of our panelists tonight and you, the audience. We really like to have community interest programs at the library that brings different aspects of the community together. So we're happy to host it and very happy to pair the knowledge with people who are looking for it.